In the exclusive, gated community of Evergreen Estates, nestled in the rolling hills of Northern California, the Carmichael family seemed to embody the American dream. Maxwell Carmichael, a 52-year-old tech mogul, had built his fortune from the ground up, turning a small startup into a multi-billion-dollar empire. His wife, Adriana, was 20 years his junior, a former model from Brazil whose exotic beauty and charm had captivated Maxwell from the moment they met. Their sprawling mansion with its manicured lawns and Olympic-sized pool was the envy of the neighborhood. To the outside world, Maxwell and Adriana appeared to have it all: wealth, status, and a seemingly perfect marriage. But behind closed doors, a different story was unfolding. Adriana Carmichael, now 32, had grown increasingly restless in her role as a trophy wife. The endless charity galas and social events that once excited her now felt hollow and unfulfilling. She yearned for something more, something real. Maxwell, consumed by his work and the pressures of maintaining his empire, had little time for his wife's emotional needs. It was on a crisp autumn morning in September 2022 that Adriana first encountered Ethan Reeves. The 28-year-old landscaper had recently been hired to redesign the Carmichaels' extensive gardens. With his rugged good looks and easygoing charm, Ethan was everything Maxwell was not: young, carefree, and attentive. Their first interaction was brief, but charged with an undeniable tension. Adriana, dressed in her designer yoga outfit, had been returning from her morning run when she spotted Ethan sketching designs near the rose garden. Their eyes met, and for a moment time seemed to stand still. Ethan's warm smile and the appreciative glance he gave Adriana ignited a spark she hadn't felt in years. Over the next few weeks, Adriana found herself making excuses to spend time in the garden. She would bring Ethan water or ask for updates on the project, relishing every moment of their increasingly flirtatious exchanges. Ethan, for his part, was drawn to Adriana's beauty and the air of sadness that seemed to surround her. Their first kiss happened on a warm October afternoon. Maxwell was away on a business trip, and Adriana had spent the day by the pool, sipping wine and watching Ethan work. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the estate, Ethan approached her to discuss some final details for the garden. The tension between them had been building for weeks, and in that moment, it finally boiled over. Adriana told Ethan that she couldn't deny her feelings any longer. Ethan replied that he had been drawn to her from the first moment they met. Their lips met in a passionate kiss, and just like that, a line was crossed that could never be uncrossed. What started as a passionate kiss quickly escalated into a full-blown affair. Adriana and Ethan began meeting in secret whenever they could: stolen moments in the garden shed, clandestine rendezvous at a motel on the outskirts of town, and passionate encounters in the very bed Adriana shared with her husband when Maxwell was away on business. For Adriana, the affair was like a breath of fresh air. With Ethan, she felt alive, desired, and understood in a way she hadn't in years. Ethan, too, found himself falling hard for the beautiful and complex woman who seemed so different from the vapid socialite he had initially assumed her to be. But as the weeks turned into months, the reality of their situation began to weigh heavily on both of them. Adriana was torn between her growing feelings for Ethan and her loyalty to Maxwell, who, despite his emotional distance, had given her a life of luxury and security. Ethan, for his part, struggled with the guilt of betraying his employer and the knowledge that he could never truly compete with Maxwell's wealth and status. As winter settled over Evergreen Estates, the affair between Adriana and Ethan intensified. They became increasingly reckless, their desire for each other overriding their caution. On more than one occasion, they nearly got caught by the household staff, leading to whispered arguments and promises to be more careful. Maxwell, consumed by a high-stakes merger at work, remained oblivious to the changes in his wife. He failed to notice Adriana's newfound glow or the way she no longer complained about his long hours at the office. In his mind, their marriage was as stable as ever, a perfect partnership of beauty and success. But cracks were beginning to form in the foundation of Adriana and Ethan's passionate affair. Ethan, growing more attached by the day, started to pressure Adriana to leave Maxwell. He painted pictures of a life they could have together, modest but filled with love and genuine connection. Adriana, while tempted, found herself hesitating. The thought of giving up her luxurious lifestyle and facing the scandal of a divorce terrified her. Their arguments became more frequent, often ending with tearful reconciliations and passionate lovemaking. After one particularly heated exchange in late January, Ethan stormed off, leaving Adriana alone and conflicted in the garden that had been the backdrop to their burgeoning romance. It was in this vulnerable moment that Adriana was approached by Sofia Martinez, the Carmichaels' longtime housekeeper. Sofia, a woman in her mid-50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, had witnessed more than she let on over the past few months. She told Adriana that she knew about the affair and urged her to end it before things got out of hand. Adriana, initially defensive, broke down in tears. She confided in Sofia, pouring out her conflicted feelings and fears. Sofia listened patiently, offering a sympathetic ear and wise counsel. She reminded Adriana of the potential consequences of her actions, not just for herself, but for everyone involved. Shaken by the conversation and the realization that her secret wasn't as well kept as she'd thought, Adriana resolved to end the affair. She arranged to meet Ethan at their usual motel, planning to break things off once and for all. The meeting, however, did not go as planned. When Adriana told Ethan she wanted to end their relationship, he reacted with a mixture of anger and desperation. He accused her of using him, of being too cowardly to leave her loveless marriage. In a moment of fury, he threatened to tell Maxwell everything. Adriana, panicked at the thought of her carefully constructed world crumbling, tried to calm Ethan down. She pleaded with him to understand, to give her more time. But Ethan, hurt and feeling betrayed, stormed out of the motel room, leaving Adriana alone and terrified of what he might do. Over the next few days, Adriana lived in constant fear. Every time her phone rang, every time Maxwell looked at her a moment too long, she was sure her secret was about to be exposed. She tried repeatedly to contact Ethan, but he refused to answer her calls or texts. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to Adriana, Ethan was wrestling with his own demons. The pain of rejection and the bitterness of what he saw as Adriana's betrayal consumed him. He spent nights drinking, replaying their moments together, and fantasizing about exposing their affair to Maxwell and watching Adriana's perfect world implode. As February dawned, tension hung heavy over Evergreen Estates. Adriana, stretched to her breaking point by fear and guilt, began to make mistakes. She became distracted and jumpy, snapping at the staff and avoiding Maxwell's attempts at conversation. Maxwell, finally noticing that something was amiss, began to pay closer attention to his wife's behavior. The situation came to a head on a cold, rainy night in mid-February. Maxwell, having left work early due to concerns about Adriana, arrived home to find the house empty. A quick call to Sofia revealed that Adriana had gone out hours ago without saying where she was going. Suspicious and worried, Maxwell decided to wait up for his wife. As the hours ticked by and the rain lashed against the windows of their mansion, Maxwell's concern turned to anger. Where was Adriana? Why wasn't she answering her phone? His mind began to race with possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. Unbeknownst to Maxwell, Adriana was at that moment in a heated confrontation with Ethan. After days of silence, he had finally agreed to meet her at a secluded spot near the edge of the estate. Adriana had gone, hoping to reason with him one last time, to beg him to keep their secret. The meeting quickly spiraled out of control. Ethan, fueled by alcohol and hurt, demanded that Adriana leave Maxwell. He told her he couldn't bear the thought of her in another man's arms. Adriana, torn between her feelings for Ethan and her fear of losing everything, tried to calm him down. As their argument intensified, neither noticed the approaching headlights of Maxwell's car. Having grown tired of waiting, Maxwell had decided to go looking for his wife. A staff member had mentioned seeing Adriana heading towards the old groundskeeper's cottage, and Maxwell's suspicions led him there. The scene that greeted Maxwell as he pulled up to the cottage would be forever seared into his memory. In the glow of his headlights, he saw Adriana locked in what appeared to be a passionate embrace with a man he recognized as the landscaper. For a moment, Maxwell sat frozen in shock, unable to comprehend what he was seeing. Then, in a burst of rage, he exploded out of the car. Adriana and Ethan, startled by the sudden light and noise, broke apart. Adriana's face paled as she saw her husband approaching, his features contorted with fury. Maxwell lunged at Ethan, his fists flying. Ethan, caught off guard, stumbled backward. Adriana screamed, begging them to stop. But years of pent-up frustration and betrayal fueled Maxwell's attack. Ethan, younger and fitter, soon began to fight back. The two men grappled in the mud, trading blows as Adriana watched in horror. She tried to intervene, but in the chaos, she was pushed aside. As she fell, her head struck a rock, and she crumpled to the ground, unconscious. The sight of Adriana lying motionless shocked both men out of their rage. They rushed to her side, momentarily united in their concern. Maxwell, his anger giving way to fear, told Ethan to call for an ambulance. But as Ethan reached for his phone, Maxwell's eyes fell on a large rock nearby, slick with rain and mud. In a split second, a dark thought crossed Maxwell's mind. Here was a chance to solve all his problems at once. Before he could reconsider, he grabbed the rock and brought it down on Ethan's head with all his might. Ethan collapsed without a sound, blood mixing with rain on the muddy ground. Maxwell stood over him, the rock still in his hand, as the full weight of what he'd done crashed over him. He looked from Ethan's still form to Adriana's unconscious figure, his mind racing. With shaking hands, Maxwell called 911, concocting a story of finding his wife and the landscaper attacked by an unknown assailant. As he waited for the ambulance to arrive, he meticulously went about staging the scene, using his knowledge of crime scenes gleaned from years of corporate legal battles. When the police and paramedics arrived, they found a distraught Maxwell cradling his unconscious wife. Ethan was pronounced dead at the scene, while Adriana was rushed to the hospital. Maxwell played the part of the concerned husband perfectly, his years of boardroom performances serving him well. In the days that followed, as Adriana lay in a coma, fighting for her life, Maxwell wove a tale of a tragic attack by an unknown assailant. He expressed shock at the revelation of the affair, playing the part of the betrayed but forgiving husband. His wealth and influence helped too. As weeks turned into months, the investigation into Ethan's death and Adriana's attack hit dead end after dead end. Maxwell's carefully crafted story held up under scrutiny, and his team of high-powered lawyers worked tirelessly to keep him out of the spotlight. The case began to grow cold, much to the frustration of Detective Lisa Harding, the lead investigator assigned to the case. Adriana, meanwhile, remained in a coma. The doctors were cautiously optimistic about her recovery, but warned Maxwell that even if she woke up, there was no guarantee she would remember the events of that fateful night. Maxwell, playing the role of the devoted husband, rarely left her bedside, all the while silently praying she would never wake up. As spring bloomed in Evergreen Estates, the community tried to move on from the tragedy. The Carmichael estate, once the crown jewel of the neighborhood, now stood as a grim reminder of the secrets that can lurk behind even the most perfect facades. The gardens that Ethan had so lovingly tended fell into disrepair, as if nature itself was mourning his loss. It was on a warm day in early May, nearly 3 months after the incident, that Adriana finally opened her eyes. Maxwell was there when it happened, his heart racing with a mixture of relief and terror. As Adriana's gaze focused on him, he held his breath, waiting to see if his carefully constructed reality was about to come crashing down. To his immense relief, Adriana's memory of the attack was fuzzy at best. She remembered arguing with Ethan, but everything after that was a blank. Maxwell, seizing the opportunity, gently filled in the gaps with his version of events, painting himself as the loving husband who had forgiven her indiscretion and stood by her through her recovery. Adriana, overwhelmed by guilt and gratitude, accepted Maxwell's story without question. As she regained her strength, she threw herself into rebuilding their marriage, desperate to make amends for her betrayal. Maxwell, for his part, played along, all the while keeping a closer eye on his wife than ever before. But as Adriana recovered, Detective Harding's suspicions grew. Something about the case didn't sit right with her. The crime scene had been too neat, the evidence too conveniently pointing away from Maxwell. She began to dig deeper, re-interviewing witnesses and poring over every piece of evidence. It was Sophia, the housekeeper, who finally provided the break in the case. Racked with guilt over her role in the events leading up to that night, she came forward with what she knew about the affair and the tensions leading up to Ethan's death. Her testimony, combined with some overlooked forensic evidence, was enough for Detective Harding to build a case against Maxwell. On a sunny morning in late June, as Maxwell and Adriana were having breakfast on their terrace, seemingly rebuilding their life together, Detective Harding arrived with a warrant for Maxwell's arrest. The charges: the murder of Ethan Reeves and the attempted murder of Adriana Carmichael. As Maxwell was led away in handcuffs, the full horror of what had happened finally dawned on Adriana. The man she had thought was her savior was in fact a cold-blooded killer. The life she had been so desperate to hold on to was built on a foundation of lies and murder. In the end, Maxwell Carmichael's carefully constructed world came crashing down around him. His trial was a media sensation, laying bare the dark underbelly of wealth and privilege. He was eventually convicted and sentenced to life in prison, without the possibility of parole. Adriana, left to pick up the pieces of her shattered life, sold the estate and used a significant portion of the proceeds to set up a foundation in Ethan's name, dedicated to supporting victims of domestic violence. She found a measure of redemption in this work, though the weight of her role in the tragic events would always remain with her. The case of the Carmichaels served as a stark reminder to the residents of Evergreen Estates, and beyond, that appearances can be deceiving, and that the pursuit of perfection often comes at a terrible cost. The once envied mansion stood empty, a silent testament to the tragedy that had unfolded within its walls, its immaculate gardens now overgrown, nature reclaiming what had once been Ethan's labor of love.